Episode 32, Good Enough. Learn these words and learn to act by them.
You're listening to the very best podcast in the world on health, wealth, and happiness. Please remember to leave a review and share with all your friends and family. And here is your host, Lars Hilser.
Is this thing on? Yeah, I think so. Good morning, good evening, good night. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, L's and G's and B's and T's and Q's and I's and dots and dashes, not to be forgotten, to be welcomed to the very best podcast in the world, your source for personal supremacy through health, wealth, and happiness. Yeah, we got that covered. Well, we are happy, aren't we? Because for the first time in history, we don't have to go out in shitty weather, but we can stay in our homos, in our home offices, and put on the freshly pressed shirt while leaving our jogging pants, our sweats, and or our underpants on altogether, just disregarding the pants altogether, because nobody's going to look at your private parts unless you kind of screw up with your camera. Good enough is something that is a term that is really looked down upon, right, by a lot of people. It's like you're doing good enough is a metaphor for you failed, which is the opposite of you're doing great. Right? Which is something you want. You want that tap on the shoulder, while in reality, doing great means investing an exorbitant amount of work into something which a lot of people are not going to care about anyhow, right? And preparing this episode, I spent, I don't know, probably over an hour looking back into my private underbelly of what I call my history, and I was so desperately looking for a prominent example of where I tried to be perfect, knowing that nobody was going to give a fuck. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait, what better and most recent example than this podcast? Because here's the truth about it. The project started years ago, taking form the idea being born. The taking form bit took the longer time. The idea was like, I think I took a crap and I was like, damn, this is a good format for a show. And then started the long and rocky and obstacle-ridden journey towards getting the first show out, right? So it was like, okay, number one, what are we going to do technology-wise? What are we going to be using? So I crammed through my technology drawers where I had a microphone, which I have had for quite some time, because the idea of doing a podcast had crossed my mind several times, and Amazon Prime Day happens and there's a microphone smiling at you and you just purchase it regardless of whether you're ever going to need it, but it's cheap, right? So it was a good microphone that I had. So that problem was solved. So you get into the next thing of technology, which is how are you going to record it? How are you going to publish it? And on comes this barrage of issues and reading and research and whatever not. So you disregard what is really important to the podcast, which is collecting ideas for episodes, reflecting on stories which, you can use in context to difficulties other people like yourself could run into in the course of your life. Do you want to change your life? What are experiences I've had that were impactful to a degree where it's worth sharing them? and so on and so forth, right? You neglect that in favor of figuring out these fucking technical difficulties. While 20 years ago, it was so beautiful. You had a tape recorder, you had a microphone, and off you went, but you didn't have any opportunity to publish it. So you always die one death, right? However, the point I'm getting to is one thing I got stuck on for months on end, which was getting the microphone to play nice with the computer. In that it was very difficult, to record a high quality audio without any hissing or without any background noises, etc. And without being an audio technician, that's rather difficult finding something, or finding a way to get rid of that thing in the first place. So I bought another microphone. What do? You throw money at the problem. And at the end of the day, it turns out it was just, some piece of software for, I don't know, like $30, which inevitably took, well, no, not inevitably, but it took care of the entire background noise issue, which was keeping me back from recording for months on end. So then we had the problem of getting the first episode on the road. And that was, I don't know, the first episode was supposed to be an introductory episode, and I still haven't made it. I think I've made about 24 attempts recording it, every night, diligently sitting down, trying to get the right microphone position, trying to get the right noise level, and so on and so forth. And then I made the pinnacle of fucking mistakes and showed what I had made to people. Well, not showed it, but, obviously played it to them because there's nothing really to show. And the people were like, yeah, it's nice, but. And then shit hit the fan, because for me, that's like, okay, back to the drawing board. Here we go again, all over again. And so I just scrapped the idea of doing the introductory episode altogether and started with the first episode just to get something on the road, right? And that in itself was so liberating. And if you go back to the first episode, it's shitty. I was sitting in a corner somewhere talking to the microphone. Now I'm standing up, totally different posture, totally different mindset. I've gotten the first hundreds of listens. Well, actually, I think we're in the thousands now. Got very positive feedback emails from people cheering me on to make more, issuing constructive critique, or critique, is that even a word? I think criticism is the right word, on what to do better, potentially, and to include in the show. People ask questions, an engaging audience. And that itself was motivation enough to carry on. I think had it not been for me to kind of toss everything with this introductory episode and start with the first, I think I'd still be, 8 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks in, I'd probably still be sitting in my recording setup every single night, totally depressed, trying to get that introductory episode right. That being said, you can spend hours and days and years on trying to achieve something that you deem perfect. The problem is that perfection itself doesn't really exist. Let that sink in for a moment. And it's, it's a very provocative exclamation to make. But if you look at nature, nothing in nature even is perfect, right? It's the evolution that constantly makes us better. And the same was true for the show, what I just mentioned, right? It's like you do the first episode, if you're, self-reflected and not totally full of shit and resistant to criticism, you kind of figure out what to tweak and what to leave alone, and what there's actually room for improvement for and what to leave away, etc. So it's an evolutionary process. If you are on a project like this or another, that you learn by your mistakes, right? And that's really the core issue to take away. So for your work, you have to acknowledge this as well. So when you do something, you get the first draft out as soon as possible. That's the real secret to success. Because unless you're, doing glossy sales material and trying to investing shitloads of work into this glossy marketing material, it's an indicator that your product is shit. And a little short story about that. We've got a stone, what is it called? I don't know, stone Smith or whatever, who deals in marble and whatever. I'm lacking the English term. And we had a project that we had to do in the house, and I needed something special done to a slab of marble. And the high glossy store that I went to get it done was like, yeah, we don't have the tools for that. It's like we have high precision water jets that can cut through about 2 centimeters, but your slab is 3 centimeters thick, so we can't do it. Thank you very much. Now, the problem was, you have to imagine this, right? This place was so glossy that I came in there with this, I don't know, 25 kilos or 30 kilos of slab in my hands, and I didn't dare to put it anywhere because it could scratch the surface of what I was putting it on and probably, lead to interesting liability claims that they would have against me. So I was standing there for about 10 minutes listening to their BS about how they couldn't do it because they were lacking the tools that the other dude, where we're going to get to in a moment, had, totally different story, right? But they were so advanced and they were so up into the marketing their product sphere that, they were so, I don't want to say ignorant, but advanced, which, doesn't always have to be positive, that they didn't really want to deal with my problem. Plus there weren't millions in it, it was, if at all, maybe a few $100 in cutting holes into what I had planned. And so they were like, yeah, go away. So I went to another, to my favorite construction place and said, look, do you know anyone? And they're like, yeah, there's this dude close to you. You probably haven't heard of him, but he does this. And I looked him up online, and he didn't even bother to put up a fucking website. He didn't have a landline phone. All that was listed was his name, stone dude, dealing in, or, working with natural stones, whatever the word is. And he was like, that was it in the online version of the Yellow Pages. So called the dude up on Friday, and he answered the phone, and he was like, yeah, I'm in, I don't know where he was. I'm going to be back on Sunday, drop by Sunday. And if you know Germany a bit, the Sunday is like the holy day of not working and pure procrastination for a lot of people. And this dude was so out of the box that he said, no, drop by on Sunday. Why not? It's totally normal. So I went there on Sunday. He looked at the slab and said, what did you pay for it? And I was like, well, I don't know, something like 30 euros or dollars or whatever. It's not a whole lot of money. And he said, well, there's a slight chance that I'll break it, but I can do it. And I drove up to his place, and it was like this, everything but the high glossy place in the center of town that I drove to get the work done initially. This place was, I don't want to say a ruin, but it was different. Let's put it that way. Right. So guy calls me up Monday night, and he's like, it's done. And I was like, okay, I'm going to drop by in the afternoon. And he was like, well, I'm not going to be there. Leave the money somewhere, and I was like, well, what is it going to cost? He's like, well, $30, as I said. And long story short, I don't know where I was going with this story. But it's like, get it out there and have people review it, get feedback. And, but by the feedback you receive, you can improve your product or service or whatever it is. And the same. And that's, I think, the bottom line is you can change your life the same way. In that, you're trying to be perfect and you're just not. Get used to it. Get over it. And if there are people who are offended by your appearance or by your pedigree or whatever, let them go. There's no reason to try to impress people that don't want to be impressed. It's a downward spiral. They reject your your attempts at impressing them, which makes you want to impress them even more, which, again, leads to denial. And, some people prey on this, and those are the worst motherfuckers that there are. It's a lot of situations in not so healthy relationships that really rely on this kind of poisonous with another kind of setup. And I think, whenever there's something that you can do, it's about learning. It's about leaving the mistake behind and taking the lesson with you. And in that sense, I think good enough is what it is, because at the end of the day, the final 20% you put into something require another 300% of work to make it perfect. And again, if you are, or your product or service require high, glossy, 100% manipulative marketing material, then your product or service is just totally shit in most cases. In that sense, I hope to hear you again tomorrow. Feedback, criticism, notes, whatever you want to send. Our inbox at the very best podcast in the world at gmail.com is pretty much always open, unless your email is spam or something. But give us a holler if there's something you want to do. We are in the last 2 weeks before we can claim to fame in the Apple podcast heaven, if you will. So in that sense, I would like to ask you to at least leave 5 stars for the show, or if you have another 3 or 4 minutes of time, write a review on what your takeaways from the show are, etc. Helps us all, because if we manage to get into the Hall of Fame, to the Heaven of Fame of Apple Podcasts, then for a few weeks we're going to have an easy time of getting more listeners to the show to spread the word even further. In that sense, I'm out. Wish you a good night or a successful day. If you haven't already, leave your hands above the blanket. My permanent advice: nothing bad can happen. And I'll hear you again tomorrow. Peace out.